Hi, I'm Julie Thompson. Welcome to the Pembroke School Committee Candidate Interview. I want to take a moment to thank our candidate for participating in this interview and collaborating with PAC TV to bring this informational programming to residents and voters this election season. Let me explain the format. We will be conducting a one-on-one interview-style Q&A format with each candidate, lasting about 30 minutes. Responses will not be timed, and follow-up questions may be asked during this format. We aim to ask up to 4 questions, but that will depend on the length of the responses, along with any follow-up discussion during this exchange. Candidates will be allowed to address anything not covered or what they would like to add clarification to at the end of the interview in their closing remarks. Let's get started. Today we're speaking with David Boyle, one of the 4 candidates running for 2 full-term seats for the Pembroke School Committee in the Pembroke Town election. Dave, thank you for joining us today.
Julie, thanks for having me. This is exciting. I feel like I'm on like the TV news here.
Well,
it's my broadcast debut.
It's the interview. Okay, I'm going to ask some questions. Here's question number 1.
Fire away.
The subject of social emotional support for both students and teachers is prevalent in budgets and conversations surrounding the entire school district. In all 3 educational levels, elementary, middle, and the high school, how do you think these efforts have been successful? And what is your vision for including them in the future?
Good question. Fair question. I think what we see and what happened, especially with COVID, that took a lot of kids by storm, took teachers by storm. Teachers had to reinvent themselves, how they teach, how they do everything. Now, again, if you're a young kind of hip teacher and you've done these things before, this was easy for you. I would think if you're a teacher 20 years, 25 years in, and somebody said, hey, we're doing a Zoom and you've got to figure, I would think that was a challenge. So the kids part to me is we made it normal for kids to sit in their rooms. And instead of going out to play, at your house or next door, people say, no, my kids can't play, whatever. So it became a normal for those kids to stay in their room, stay on their computers, stay on their devices, and not play, not get outside. All right, so now what happens is we have to look at things, and again, I'm not sure how old you are, I won't ask your age, but I can tell you how old I am. We never had social workers in schools. We never had, there was a traveling school nurse. We had a traveling school secretary. So now you have to look and say, okay, we have X amount of kids and teachers. And again, there was some, the COVID funding, call it what you want, that we've been able to use for some of these programs, but that's going to run out. You look at the budget and you try to tell people we're going to add, perhaps a social worker, but we may have to lose a teacher on the other side. Now, it all figures into the budget, but when you try to explain to the average person on the street, at the soccer field or at Stop and Shop, whatever, we're going to add a school psychologist, or we're going to add a nurse, and they look at you and say, what do we need those for? It's a different world right now.
But speaking to what you've done so far, what programs have been put in place in both the elementary, middle, and high school that actually help kids? Are there special places they go? I mean, how does that all work?
Yeah, and what's funny, I'm going to drop, I call it the little Titan room, and basically it's, I don't call it a timeout room, it's kind of, to me it's like a debriefing thing. If a kid's having a rough day, they kind of go and sit on the rug. There's a teacher, a paraprofessional in there. It's been very successful in elementary schools. We have, at the high school, similar thing in the junior high as well. In the high school, we have the same type of thing where kids that might have been out of school for a week or 10 days, whatever, instead of kind of throwing them right back into school, they can go into this, little program, and kind of when they feel ready, they can go. Flip side is if you're in school and it starts to close in on you a little, you can go the other way.
Okay.
It's been successful. It's been a great model. I'm embarrassed to say I can't think of the name of it off the top of my head, but those are the things. Again, you have to start thinking outside the box. The old days of, I hate to say, suck it up, buttercup, and this is the way it was, walk to school uphill both ways, and all that stuff.
With no shoes.
With no shoes, snow, whatever.
Right.
Those days are gone.
Yeah, right.
And, I always told you the key to education, without kind of getting off topic here, is everybody has to win. We want the kids to win. I want the teachers to win. I want, faculty and administration, but I want parents to win.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I want everybody to, and I'm not sure winning's the term you want to say, but everybody wants to feel good about it.
Right.
You want a positive experience.
Right.
I don't want kids going to school not liking it, not wanting to get on the bus, whatever it happened to be.
Now, what about the teachers? Because the teachers have also gone through an awful lot in the last few years.
Yeah.
How does the social emotional support program work for teachers? What do you have in place for them?
Well, I think they do a lot of professional training, whether those half days of school, they run programs for the teachers, and there's all different levels of program. But I think a lot of times, and I wish I could back it up with factual data, I think a lot of teachers are a little embarrassed to come forward and sit there and say, hey, I'm having a tough time. This is difficult for me. It's not the same way. So I think if people reach out, we're happy to help, whatever we can do. But if they're not reaching out, that's my concern. No different than a family not reaching out. Again, I go back to when the whole COVID started. I remember talking to the superintendent. We feed a lot of kids, and people don't think of that in Pembroke. They think Pembroke is kind of a well-to-do area. We had to figure out how to feed these kids and these families. That was a process. So here you are taking care of that, and you're still trying to educate them and get again, a bit of a perfect storm. That wasn't easy. I give full credit, to Erin, to Mary Beth, to Jess, their team. They go above and beyond, and they do a wonderful job. And again, a lot of times thankless positions. You know what I mean?
And you think this type of support will continue?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
It has to continue.
Okay.
There's no other way around it. One thing I was going to put a plug in for, and if you ever get the chance, and I love PAC TV, have you ever seen the integrated sports? They do like the basketball team. We take some of our students with special needs and we pair them up.
Yes, absolutely, yeah.
Oh my gosh! I said I've been to a couple of basketball games. I love that program.
It's a win-win.
Well, somebody said it's grant funded.
Yeah.
So we're trying to figure out how to make it. I said we're going to make that work, no matter what it takes. I said if that's not the feel-good story for me,
you don't know what it is. Okay, question 2. The budget includes mandates, collective bargaining outcomes, facility and technology maintenance and upgrades, and dealing with the long, lingering impacts of COVID. How do you approach the subject of priorities when you look at the budget?
Oh, wow. I mean, that's, that could be a TV show unto itself.
Yep.
What happens with the budget, and you try to explain to people, so much of the budget is salaries, benefits, things of that nature. When you look at some of the programs, moving forward, it becomes this very interesting dynamic, and you try to explain to people like unfunded mandates. The state says to you, you have to do this. Okay, well, pay me for that.
Yeah.
So we've had, Representative Cutler, Representative Lenatra, Senator Moran come in, and we tell them our concerns.
Yeah.
Now, again, I don't want to be stereotypical, but, we have fractured districts. Representative Cutler covers X amount, Lenatra, what it's going down for. Well, in Boston, you see the money they put into the Boston system, or to Lawrence, or to Lowell, or to Lynn. They have a delegation. They've got more people than we do.
Yeah.
So we don't get the same type of funding. And again, a lot of times, it's funny, I had this discussion with a gentleman at the gym, and he was saying, well, geez, so-and-so's kid goes to school in Needham. What am I paying for that for? And I nicely said, well, what if your kid had to go to school in Newton? Well, I said, okay, well, same story.
Right.
So when people say, that's the hard part of those things.
Right.
When you look at the budget, we always thought we call that maintenance of effort budget, and say, just to run the schools, this is going to be our cost.
Yep.
And we just had the last meeting, and I'm going to take a little bit of probably call a shot here. When we were on Zoom, we had 300, 400, 500 people at meetings. We do meetings now. There's probably more people in this room than at some of the school committee meetings. And then someone says, well, how could you have voted for that? And you're saying, where were you when we were doing this? And we try to explain why, we have to discontinue this or add this.
Well, but that's the question, is how do you decide? When the different departments create their budgets, or they bring their budgets to you and say, here, this is performing arts, this is whatever it is. How do you, I'm sure you look at each budget and say, wow, that's great. That's great. That's great. But you can't fund them all.
No,
So what do you use as your criteria?
You get into want versus need.
Okay.
And then the way I always look at it is, how do we affect the biggest amount of people? You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
And again, perfect example, and I'm probably going to open a can of worms here. If you look at the big problem now is Voc Ed. That's the big hot button.
And we'll talk
question.
about that separately.
Yeah, we'll get into that. But now what happens is you're talking a small number of kids. And again, I support it 100%. Let's do what we can. But, if we have to get some kind of an override or go forward to say, hey, we've got to come up with X amount of money, whatever, you're talking between 6 and maybe 20 kids. Well, that's not, if you look at town meeting, what does that come up to? 12 parents, maybe 40, sprinkling some grandparents. you're not going to win a vote with 50 people at town meeting.
right.
And someone's going to sit there and say, again, I go back to hot button issues. We've got the rec center being done. Now you've got the public safety building they want. People want voc ed. I'm not saying you're going to raise taxes, but Pembroke has a very small commercial base. We have Route 139. That's it.
Right.
We don't have a lot of businesses. So, and again, I don't want to say I'm avoiding the question. So then you have to look in priorities. How do you affect the most amount of kids at a price? But then there's things like, you look at the air conditioners on the roof, and you sit there and say, okay, if I don't replace it now, 2 years from now, it's going to cost us more money. It's a bigger fix.
Right.
So do I say, okay, I'm going to take X amount of money to fix the air conditioner. Okay, maybe we have to pull this program back.
So if I'm hearing you, it's a multifaceted process to figure out what to actually fund in a budget.
Yeah. And I mean, the thing is, what you can't do is sit there and say, okay, my kid plays football. I've got to support athletics.
Right.
My kid's in the band. We have to. You have to look at the entire picture. We want to help everybody. There's no one sit there and says, oh, gee, we don't want a good football team. We want a lousy band. We don't want a good drama club. Everybody wants perfect.
Right.
And that's what we try to do.
Yeah.
But if you said to somebody, we're going to raise your tax rate, whatever, oh, don't.
Yeah.
You're part of a community. This is how it works.
Right.
Well, you can cut some of the fat. Please come to a meeting. Tell me where my fat is. Show me where my fat is.
Yeah.
I'd be happy to,
Okay.
So.
Yep. Okay. And people can find the budget where?
School website.
Okay.
Yeah, and it might actually be on the town website too. I'm sure.
Okay. Let's go to the next question. Okay, let's do the one about. Let's do this one.
Yeah.
There's much discussion and a very few options on the table regarding the vocational educational offerings for Pembroke students, as we started to talk about.
Right.
What is your opinion of each of the options that are actually there, and do you think one or any of them will come to fruition, and when, if so?
I'm just writing a couple of notes here. Again, fair question. I think the one that most people think of is we should be part of South Shore. Okay, South Shore Vocational.
Okay.
That's kind of the thing. They're a proven entity.
Yep.
Well, and again, I don't want to misspeak and say it's going to be $1 million, and someone says it's $1.2 million. I don't want to say it's 700,000. So the exact
you
numbers
mean to join and get
involved.
involved?
And get involved.
Okay.
It's a multiple moving step. We've had the superintendent from South Shore come in. He was fantastic. Did a wonderful presentation. So you sit there and say, okay, South Shore would kind of be our first dream option. Well, what happens is they represent, I think it's 8 towns. They give their towns first pick.
Of course.
If there were open seats, Pembroke got a shot. Well, there's no open seats. We don't get a shot. And people have said to us, well, Julie went there. I want her younger sister to go there.
Yeah.
Great idea. If there's not an open seat. We have a partnership with Silver Lake. Unfortunately, the same thing. There was, I'd say, X amount of seats. It's not the same amount of shops as they would have at South Shore. But we had kind of agreement, whatever seats are left over.
Well, when you say kind of agreement, when a lot of people are under the assumption that when Pembroke broke from Silver Lake, that there was a guarantee in place for Pembroke students to be able to be seated at those.
Not that I'm aware. This is an agreement we put together probably, I'm going to say 2 years ago, maybe a little
so
more.
this has nothing to do with when
And again, I know it sounds crazy. I don't say we didn't see this train coming down the track, but we just thought it might be coming a little slower. And we sat there and said, okay, again, you're talking 6 or 8 kids a year. We're not talking 50 kids who want to get up and go to Silver Lake.
Gotcha.
Well, now all of a sudden, their seats are full. We say, okay. So that option's kind of off the table.
Okay.
So I believe we have a presentation before town meeting that says, can we do an exploratory committee? There's no commitment. There's no, whatever, but let's look into it. If the town votes us down, do we still do the committee? I don't know. I mean, if there's no interest and you sit there and say, I'm going to run into a cement wall, then what do you do? So you've got to kind of refigure that one out.
But if there's no cost to it, why would the town vote down
who knows?
It's just
again, it's town meeting. If
we're trying to find out what our options are, right?
That's what the committee would be.
Okay.
The other part is, people are saying it's roughly $1 million buy-in to get into South Shore. Once we form the committee, to become a member town, and then plus as we move forward. So now the problem you run into there with South Shore is we then have to get approved by all the other towns that are there. So if all of a sudden Abington says our school's too big, we don't want to add Pembroke. Like Marshfield's in the middle of the process. I know they have a vote coming up. I think where the town plans to go forward. Well, they can still plan to go forward. They can pass it 100-0. If one town, to the way I understand it, says, no, we don't want, the Marshfield, dead issue. You're done.
Well, what about, now I've heard that there's plans to expand South Shore Votech. Make it
well,
larger.
that's why there's a big buy-in. So
Okay.
basically, we'd be building a school in another town. So now
that would be the $1 million or $1.2 million, whatever it is to
so
buy
now you
in,
start
was to help pay
explaining.
for that. Okay, I got it.
So now
I got
you
it.
say to somebody, we're going to take $1 million out of our town budget to spend in Hanover to send 6 kids to school, 12 kids to school, 20 kids to school. Well, someone's going to come back and say, well, what about our 800 kids at the high school or our X amount of kids at Hobbamock? Or again, it becomes I'm trying to do a quandary, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, that's tough.
There's no easy answer. So then, like someone said, well, what about retrofitting Pembroke High School? Well, that's going to cost money.
Sure.
So now you sit there and say, okay, would $1 million reinvest back in? But can we put in an automotive shop? I don't know. I'd have to look at the building. Can we put in metal shops? I don't know.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, that's not. That's for people a little higher in the food chain
So
than me.
this is an ongoing discussion that is certainly not going to be answered this year.
No,
Yeah.
no,
Okay.
and I said it's a hot button issue.
Yeah.
This is going to be an exciting election year in Pembroke, and you and I kind of mentioned that. People are running, people are involved, people care.
Yep.
And I appreciate all those people that are putting themselves out there. That's a great thing.
Absolutely.
But the people that are hardcore on the voc ed, the people that are hardcore on the public safety, the recreation, it's a hot button.
It is. Okay, question 4. If someone asked you to describe the educational experience that a student would have in the town of Pembroke, what would you say that the greatest strengths are and the most critical areas that need improvement? And be honest.
I'll be honest, I think one of the best things we did is a few years back we added full-day kindergarten. That was a big plus. I've talked to young people that have moved to town. People from out of town are very impressed with the Pembroke school systems. People within the town, I don't think, appreciate what they have. Could it be better? Sure. There's all sorts of things. You talk to different people. Again, I'm not a big fan of what I call the middle school setup, 7 and 8, because to me, you just get there, you're going home. I grew up in a system with 7, 8, 9. So in 7th grade, you would, they call them sevies, like the young kid. Well, 8th grade, you were kind of like in the middle of the road. 9th grade, you were cool. Then you go to high school, you start all over again. Now you're a 10th grade kid, and that's how it worked. To me, that 7, 8 identity in junior high to me is very essential. I'm hitting my little thing here. I apologize. That becomes so important. So can you improve it? Sure. Would you like, I hate to say, so much of it comes down to money. But when you realize, you spend in salaries and benefits and health care, and everyone deserves it. I mean, if you were a teacher for 30 years, you deserve your pension or whatever program we have there. You deserve your health care. It's there. But those costs are rising every year.
Sure.
Healthcare is going up.
Yeah.
All these things go up, and people sit there and say, well, that's, your budget's this. We're actually a smaller portion, I believe, this year of the town budget than we've been in the past. I believe we're under 50%, and I think at our highest point, we were like 53% of the town budget.
Now, another thing about Pembroke is, what about the turnover of teachers? Do you have a relatively low turnover rate?
Yes. Yeah.
So what does that say?
I think it says a lot about the administration. I think it says a lot about the working environment. I think it says a lot about the people you work with. You're happy being there. I'm thrilled. A couple of years ago, we hired a new athletic director, Brian Phillips. I love the fact he calls kids student athletes. I grew up old-fashioned with my dad being a principal and whatever. And, instead of saying, Julie's a lacrosse player or a field hockey player, he always refers to, he said, Julie Thompson, she's a good student athlete.
Oh, yeah.
I think that's the guy to me that focuses us in the right direction. We've got coaches, we've got the band people. My daughter just came back from the band trip. Yeah. Wonderful experience. Yeah. People are raving about it. Those are the things you love, and I love seeing that whole thing. I always tell people, education is basically an experience. Yeah. School is part of the experience. But if you're involved in a club or a team or an activity, that's what education to me is about.
It certainly adds to it.
It's the whole, I go back to everybody wins, everybody should have a good time. But you also have to look at priorities and, what does cost? Well, hey, football's very expensive. Hockey's very expensive. Ice time.
Yep.
You know, that's something we're battling with now, that the rink has a new owner, you know, and so prices went up on us. What do you do?
Right.
So,
Right. That goes back to the budget again.
oh yeah.
We already went through that one. All right, here's the last question.
Yeah.
I want to ask you about is security. Now, this is obviously a heartbreaking situation that's going on in our country in a lot of schools. There's violence. There's a subject that school systems have to take very, very seriously. What rating or grade would you give Pembroke overall in preparation of and handling of security in all of our schools?
I think I'd give us a B because there's always room to improve.
Yep.
We had a presentation, again, I'm going to say a year or two ago, by the police department on how they handle shootings. And I know this sounds very morbid. They go in and they go after the shooter. So not to be mean, Julie, if you or I are on the ground, they're stepping over us. They want to neutralize the shooter. So that's not a pleasant experience. Now we're spending some money to fix, you know, the bars and the windows and things of that nature, so people just can't walk to the back door by the dumpster and pull it open. Is that a threat? I think the last statistic I saw, there's a school shooting every 3 months. Again, growing up as I did, never heard of that.
No.
I don't think until Columbine happened you ever heard of that. I will say, in full disclosure, I have a very big security background. I've done security for years. I worked the Olympics in '96. I've done World Cup soccer. I've done a lot of stuff. So this is kind of near and dear to my heart. You know, do we have a resource officer? Yes, we do. Someone said to me, well, what if we did one in each school? Again, I'm fine with it. It's a cost. You know what I'm saying? There is a major cost involved with putting a police officer in every school.
Sure.
So, you know, the kids have been, I hate to say, they've gone through training drills, you know,
Right.
like don't
I
get
was
by
just
the
gonna ask
door,
about
you know,
that, right.
they now make bulletproof backpacks. I mean, that's the stuff, things like that, it almost bothers me. I think we had a scare a few years ago before I was on the board with a kid that supposedly wrote up a hit list or something or other. And then, of course, oh, I was joking. Well, you don't know who's joking anymore.
Right.
And,
right.
you know, I used to tell people, again, for example, you know, with the Olympics, we're going back to '96. This is before 9/11 and all that stuff. And we'd have people coming through the gates, and someone would say, do I look like a terrorist? I remember saying to a guy, I'm down in Atlanta, and I said, if you want to point out the terrorist to me, I'd be happy not to let him in.
Yeah.
And they kind of look at you, and I'm saying, what a stupid statement. You know, they come in all shapes and sizes.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's just, so do I think, quickly, I think we're doing as good as we can, and we're ahead of the curve.
Okay. And what about the prepping the kids for drills, lockdowns? How do you feel we do with those, and how do you think that affects kids and teachers and parents
well, again,
and staff?
We do it again. These are things you never thought you'd have to do.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And just to me, you know, parenting to me wasn't supposed to be part of a teacher's job. You know what I mean? Or part of an administrator's job. So when your kids, I mean, I remember when Sandy Hook happened, my daughter knew I'd do security. And she actually said to me, she was about 8 years old at the time. And she said, Dad, she goes, why didn't you stop him? Why didn't you do something? And I'm trying to explain to my daughter, one, I'm nowhere near Sandy Hook. I later met a teacher from Sandy Hook who I had met at a festival that I was doing security for. It's the whole mindset of that. It boggles you. You know, what do you do for teachers? I mean, of course, if God forbid, if something like that ever happened here or anywhere, you know, you'd get the counselors in right away. You'd get but you know, how do you set people back from that? I have no idea.
Right.
You know.
But you part of the ongoing process in all the schools is an active security system,
Yeah.
I would assume.
Yeah.
And people don't need to know all about that.
Nope.
Because that's
I
why
always,
security
I
is
always
security.
laugh when the marathon says, we're going to tell you our security plans. Well, that's a great idea.
Yeah.
You know, don't get me wrong. I get the idea of, you know, clear plastic bags and all
Sure.
this type of, you know,
Yeah.
it's bizarre. But no, I don't want to sit there and know there's 20 undercover guys walking around.
Right.
Could
Yeah.
there be 40, 60, 80?
Yep.
You got them figured out.
Yep.
You know, is there one guy out there undercover? Is there 50?
Yeah.
So, but again, I think our people, you prepare for the worst and hope for the best.
Yeah,
And again,
exactly.
you always like to say, I hope this never happens in a little place like Pembroke.
Right, exactly. Okay. So thank you for answering those 5 questions. So why don't you take the next 2 to 3 minutes to give your closing remarks. You can do it to that camera.
I get to do that, okay?
Yeah, you can, anything you want to revisit, anything we didn't talk about, any subjects that you'd like to say, and then why there's obviously 2 seats open and there's 4 people running.
Yeah.
Why you want to, and you're an incumbent, why you want to be reelected.
Yeah, let me first explain, too, there's technically 2 school committee races.
Yep.
One is Mike Quinn's unopposed. Mike was appointed to fill out a term, which was Mike Tropiano's seat. And he's running this. So people said, well, how many people are running? And you sit there and say, well, technically, there's 5. Mike Quinn's unopposed. Lance Kennedy's up for re-election. I'm up for re-election. There's 2 other candidates that I believe in. I'm joking. You see the signs everywhere now. It's so much fun. There were signs all over Pembroke. It was like Halloween. I tell people, why me? I grew up here every summer of my life. I worked, at the town landing committee for years. I got involved with the school committee 6 years ago, and believe it or not, I'm a school teacher by trade. That's what I actually went to school for. But I get out in '83, and they passed Prop 2.5 in '81. So my father, who was a high school principal, said, you better find something else to do. I never envisioned the career path I would take, but so far, so good.
Yeah.
I've got a solid business background. We have a very good committee, but a very inexperienced committee. What happens is, again, Mike just came on within the last few months. Sue might be in her first year. Sue Bollinger, lovely woman. Lance came in an appointed position, got reelected. Susie Scholl is in her second term. I would be running for my third term. I like to think I'm probably one of the only committee members who involved like teacher negotiations. I've gone through the budget cycles. I could say years ago, before you knew me, I actually worked on Beacon Hill. So that was in the 80s. So now people are guessing how old I am. I think I bring a lot to the table. I think voters can be fickle. But again, if there's any, what I call response, like when I walk around Stop and Shop. I had a woman literally chase me across Stop and Shop parking lot, true story. And she said, you're Mr. Boyle. And I'm thinking, oh boy, someone's going to complain to me about whatever. And she said, I want a sign for my front yard. I was like, then I said, can I meet you? It was a beautiful sign location, by the way. That's the stuff that excites you. You sit there, wow, this is really cool. But why do you do it? You do it because you care. You're not getting paid. You're in the school committee. No one's paying me. Someone said, why do you do it? Why, I've got a big full-time job working for a billion-dollar company. My kids are in the system. I have stake. I have skin in the game. It's why I want to be there, and I want to make good decisions.
Okay.
And again, I always tell people, thank you to the people that are running, not just for, school committee, but for selectmen, library trustee, across the board, whatever you're running for, you're putting yourself out there. But I will tell you, be prepared, because everybody's got to tell you how to do it better. And you and I were joking off camera. I've had people come up to me and say, well, I got a problem with so-and-so. What's your name? I'm not going to tell you. Okay, well, that does me a lot of good, So it's a rewarding job. I go home, you prepare for it. You like to think you make the right decisions. Again, I'll go back to a few years ago. We had a big thing with the band. And I remember saying to one of the parents, I said, I 100% disagree with you, but I'm also an elected official. I'm supposed to be the voice of the people. I'm going to go with you. Now, again, if it's a hill you're going to die on for a certain thing, but you know what? To me, a band saying mandatory versus voluntary, or whatever the terminology was at the time, that's not a hill you're going to die on. Yeah. Can you compromise? Sure. Do you lean a certain way? Sure. But you know what? The one thing I've always loved, even when I came on the committee back when Patrick Chilcott was on it and Ginny Wandell, these are people that are pillars of the community. Nice, super people. We all listen to each other. And every now and then we disagree. And Patrick and I are dear friends, and he'll always say to me every now and then, he said, I was right on that when you were wrong. And I'm like, oh, Patrick, I think I was right and you were wrong. So I'd ask the people, I think my track record speaks for itself. Again, I'm involved. I'm around town. Everybody knows me. I'd love to get reelected. I want to do another 3 years. And again, I thank you for this. This has been, actually, it was cool. For the amount of time, I felt we did this in about 2 minutes.
Nope, 29.
29. There we go. That's not bad.
Okay.
Most people tell me I have no trouble talking, so we're off to a good start.
Well, thank you, David. Thank you for participating in this interview, and we wish you the best of luck throughout the campaign and in the election. For our viewers, thank you for joining us. If you're interested in watching replays of this interview, please visit our website, pactv.org, for replay times and online viewing options, including PacTV's on-demand and streaming service, PacTV Prime. Please make your choices heard by voting in the town election on Saturday, May 13th. Thank you, and good day.